Good evening. Welcome to the Chief Executive 2022 Policy Address TV Forum. I'm the host, Lilian Liu of Now TV. The Chief Executive has delivered his first policy address, and we have invited Mr. John Lee, the Chief Executive, to join us here for some discussion. Good evening, Chief Executive. Good evening, Lilian, and good evening, members of the audience. Now, there are other co-organizers of this forum. We have Lau Chun-yuk from TVB, Wong Ming-hei from RTHK, Poon Yu-sing from Cable TV, and David Wong from Phoenix TV. Chief Executive, we see that in the policy address, housing and land supply accounts for a good portion of your policy address. And then you mentioned that you want the public to see hope when it comes to housing. And we see that you have this new light public housing. Hopefully there will be 30,000 units in 5 years. Some people are saying that the waiting time for public rental housing is getting longer and longer. And now you propose a light public housing which could be built in a shorter time frame. At the same time, you put a cap on the waiting time. Some wonder if you have changed the rules by doing this. They think that you are trying to, just cook your book. Now, when it comes to land supply for public housing, under the long-term housing strategy, there is sufficient land to build public housing units for the public, but the wait is 10 years. Because in the first 5 years, we could only complete a third of the target. For the remaining two-thirds of the target, it will only be realized in the second 5-year period. So are we going to wait 10 years to resolve the housing issue? Or in the first 5 years, when we could only achieve one-third of the target, could we do more to provide, to build more public housing for those on the waiting list? We're talking about people in inadequate housing condition. So the sooner they could, be lifted out of the condition, the better. And especially I've visited subdivided units myself. So I try to see what we can do in the first 5 years. When we cannot meet all the demands, how do we help people get public housing? When it comes to housing production, we need time to do that. We need land to do that. We can't just build housing units out of nothing. So that's why I have asked my colleagues to consider ways so that we could allow more people to get public housing in the first 5 years. Many options were floated, but I believe the quickest way for us to achieve that is for the government to take the initiative. We need to build public housing using the government's method because we have confidence in that. Maybe we could build public housing units that are not as nice, but then we'll be able to house people at once. So that's why this is a new concept. So when it comes, so we're tinkering with the building program, and also we could build taller blocks. If we ask outside contractors to build the units, we could use MIC, the Modular Integrated Construction Method. And if we do the building ourselves, then we could build taller blocks. The aim is for people to be housed earlier. Now, for those on the waiting list, what matters most to them is that they could get public housing the soonest possible. So that's why we are proposing light public housing, and together with the conventional public housing, and we believe with the additional 30,000 units of light public housing, then we're able to reduce the waiting time to within 4 years. Now, in fact, in Hong Kong, the public housing units are not that desirable in terms of quality. At least some think so. And then now you're proposing light public housing. So what about the quality, or are you just trying to let the people see hope? Well, it's a matter of whether it's urgent or not. Of course, everyone would like more space and better living environment. But then the reality is we have a problem with housing land supply. And then there are people living in appalling housing condition. There is water seepage, and then there's poor ventilation and so on. This shouldn't stay that way. ideally, everyone will enjoy spacious living environment, but it's not realistic. For those who need help the most most urgently, what can we do? So I believe that is squarely the duty of the government. That's why, yes, in the first phase, we are producing light public housing so people could get housing sooner, and then their living condition could be improved. Now, when I visited the subdivided unit tenants, when they heard something that of this standard, they thought it was a big improvement over what they are facing now. But of course, we could always do better, but we need to first deal with the most pressing issue, because over a 10-year time frame, we do have enough housing supply. And maybe at that stage, there will be pursuing something else other than just quantity. And in any case, I have put a cap on this on the living area. That is sellable area is 26 square meters. It's the case for both public and private housing. So this is the standard we want to go by. Now I'll hand over to David Wong of Phoenix TV. Good evening, Chief Executive. What is your view on property prices? Now, in a policy address, it's proposed that for those who have stayed in Hong Kong for 7 years, they could be exempted from the buyer stamp duty. So what is the impact on the housing market? Many in the community who are earning several tens of thousands of dollars a month, they're not able to afford their own homes. Are there any measures in the policy address that could help these people buy their homes as soon as possible? Now, we have the target of attracting talent to Hong Kong. We have proposed various measures, and then we are also proposing that for those who have lived here for 7 years or more, and they become permanent resident under our talent admission schemes, then we will allow them to apply for reimbursement of the extra stamp duty they paid. The whole purpose is for attracting talent so they could make Hong Kong their home. And also, we don't want to encourage speculation. That's why there is this proposal for people to become permanent residents, and then they could apply for this reimbursement of stamp duty. Because if people make Hong Kong their home, then of course they would have housing needs, and this condition would apply in their case. But then, of course, for the general public, if they just rely on their monthly wage, it will be a long mortgage repayment period for them. But what we try to achieve is stable supply of housing. So if people know there is a stable supply of housing, they could then work out when they could afford to buy their home. We don't want property prices to fluctuate wildly. That's why we're going by the long-term housing strategy, projection in the demand for private housing units, and on that basis, we make our plans. As for the demand for private housing units over a 10-year period is about 130,000 units. And in 5 years, we could identify land for the supply of 72,000 units, and that's not counting the URA redevelopment projects. So in terms of land supply, we do have enough of that. It's a matter of us, proceeding steadily in rolling out these units. I think with private housing, a housing ladder is important because some may have basic housing needs, and for others, or because they do well in their career or for other reasons, they could live in bigger apartments. So with this basis, everyone is able to plan for their future housing needs, as long as they have to know that we have the land supply. Next, Mr. Pun Yu-sing of cable TV. Well, it's light public housing is new name, but actually it's just an existing housing form using MIC. So why do you have to change the time for the waiting time? Because it seems to be the same thing. Because to people, actually, the waiting time is still as long. And some may think this is not a solution to the root of the problem. And it's still just some form of temporary housing, and people may not feel so good about such housing. Now, we are still providing conventional public housing. We're keeping the waiting time for that. At the same time, we are proposing an integrated, consolidated waiting time. Why would we want to do that? Because we want to give people hope. You know, for you, you're not on the waiting list, so you don't feel anything. For those who are on the waiting list, they know there is now this offer of light public housing. Instead of waiting 6 or 7 years, they need only wait 4.5 years. That's important to them. To them, it's important when they could be allocated public housing. And the most important for them is to leave behind their inadequate housing. And in fact, we have also announced the waiting time for conventional public housing, so it's all transparent. But then I believe we need to put ourselves in the shoes of those on the waiting list. Maybe for those on the waiting list, they know that, oh, now the waiting time is 4.5 years. I've waited some time. I would opt for that, because there is this real need. And at the same time, they could still keep their place on the waiting list for for conventional public housing. We're just giving them another option. Say, if we offer like public housing, they don't like the location, it's not convenient for the children to go to school or whatever, then they need not opt for that. So we're just giving them another option. So the option is with those on the waiting list. Well, maybe there's a demand for light public housing, so you will first introduce 30,000 units. Would you be providing more units in future? And because if that's the case, then it may have an impact on the supply of land and private housing, because it's all about, limited land resources. Now, with light public housing, we're using temporary sites. That means sites that are not yet ready for long-term development. And so for the sites we pick, we hope people could stay there for 5 years. We don't want people to have to move around so frequently. If we put ourselves in the shoes, we don't want that, of course. So with the light public housing, maybe we could really help people on the waiting list. And it doesn't matter what means we resort to. It will be good means as long as people benefit from that. And you might ask whether this will be a permanent solution. Logically, it won't be a permanent solution because, as I said, we're talking about the 10-year target. And we know that there is a demand for about 300,000 units, public housing units. And we've already identified land for the production of 360,000 public housing units. So why are we proposing this rather innovative approach? It's because in the first 5 years, there is a bigger gap. There's a shortfall in supply. But then in the second 5-year period, the supply will double almost. So for the first 5 years, if we provide light public housing, in theory, then in the second 5 years, there will be enough units for people to get housing sooner. But will we make light public housing permanent? Well, we'll have to see. But then what we want to do is to help people who want to get public housing. Maybe there will always be such a demand because there may be new demands for land supply. But at the end, it's about those on the waiting list. If they could get housing earlier, it's hope for them. Thank you. That's all for this session. We will come back again on the policy address after the commercial break.
Coming back to the TV forum on the Policy Address 2022, we will continue to discuss policies on land and housing. First, we have questions from the reporter from TVB News. Chief Executive, you have shown your resolve to help those in inadequate housing. There are now transitional housing units operated by non-governmental organizations. Now, apart from the fact that the light public housing will be led by the government, now, what are some other differences? And will these light public housings in urban or rural areas? Now, there will be such units in both rural and urban areas. For light public housing units, we will be able to complete them quickly. Now, people will be able to stay in such units for longer times, our target being a stay for 5 years. I thank many NGOs for putting their heart and much effort into operating the transitional housing units. Now, when it comes to constructing housing units, the government is more familiar with the process and will be able to deliver the units more quickly. Now, some NGOs have told us that they are exhausted because unexpected problems have cropped up. When the government takes over housing projects, it will be in control, and it will be able to deliver more units and be able to build taller buildings, and residents will be able to stay in such units for a longer period. There will also be more spacious units than those available in transitional housings. The rent at light public housing units will also be lower, roughly 90% of those regular public rental housing units. And the rent at transitional housing will also be higher than that in light public housing units. Now, of course, transitional housing units are valuable. That's why, in my policy address, I've said that we will continue to support the more than 20,000 transitional housing units. There's one benefit with transitional housing units. The operators will provide extra services. I have keep an open mind on these matters. Now, if these operators of transitional housing wishes to provide extra services, I will be happy to think about how to cooperate. People want to get housed quickly. They want more spacious units and more pleasant environment. But some organizations operating the transitional housings are saying that if public rental housing comes with cheaper rents, and there will be competition. Now, for transitional housing units that are smaller, some people can be housed. But if you have larger units, light public housing units, they can be used for families. Now, I'm receptive to all views. If it's helpful in the cause, we will consider such suggestions. But we have to bear in mind the purpose of launching the light public housing units. There are people already on the wait list for public rental housing for 7 years or 6 years. Can we get them housed quickly? We have to respond to their aspirations. Now, how do we get the best of both worlds? We are open to views on this. The goal here is to help get people housed as quickly as possible. So let's stick to the first goal. Now, there's a reason for everything, but the point here is that we want to get people housed quickly, so that people on the wait list for public rental housing will find the wait list shorter. We're now over to Ms. Wong Ming-Hei from TMHK. Let's talk about the KPI. There are 110 KPIs. That's a large number. And now you're at the top of the SAR government. Is there any KPI for yourself? For the 110 KPIs, how many do you have to accomplish before you will see yourself as a competent and up to scratch? I thank you for the questions. Now, there are 110 KPIs covering a variety of things. Some come with a time limit. Others have to do with quantities. Others touch on both quantities and time. For housing, most KPIs involve both the quantity and time. When I was taking electoral questions or running for my campaign, there were 2 points about KPIs. First, we can keep track of the progress so that we can do better. And if we see something is falling short, we can figure out if there are things that we didn't anticipate so that ultimately we can achieve our goal. Another purpose of having a KPI is to achieve a change in the culture. Once we have KPIs in place, everyone works towards the goal, that is the KPI, so that we can bring about a shift in the culture so that we can have a result-oriented culture. And that's closely linked to my policy address. If, say, we fall short of a KPI, we will have to look at what's causing that. external factors? Is there a legal reason? In those cases, we try to fix the problem. We try to work towards the goal. But if someone isn't doing their job, then they will have to be held accountable. For these KPIs, we focus on the work at hand. We don't have any KPIs targeting particular people, and doing so will be hard. If someone's not doing a good job, the chief executive is responsible, whether you have a KPI for that or not. First, I'm responsible to the general public. I'm responsible to the central people's government. And I will blame myself, too. Whatever KPIs there are, the community can comment on the work done by the chief executive. As I take forward the work of the government as the chief executive, my job is that for our team as a whole, we work towards the goal. And that's why I have set all these KPIs. At the end of the day, if our team has given all they have and there are external factors causing us to fail to meet the goals, then I'm responsible. I try to do better. The goal is that to have people benefit from what we do. No matter what, we have to achieve the goal that is benefiting the people. Now, if you fail to meet the goal, you will do better. For those who don't do their job well, they will have to be held accountable. We have to be rolling there. But we first have to find out what's causing the problem. If it's not about personal failings but external factors, then we will have to help the person involved. But if someone is lackluster in doing their job or delaying the work, then that person will have to be held accountable. In my policy address, I have mentioned that officials are politically accountable. For civil servants, there is also a reward and punishment mechanism. In terms of the management of the civil service, things have to be more transparent. There will have to be a reward and punishment mechanism. If there is supervision and assistance and the performance is still substandard, then there will have to be discipline actions. Next round, we will continue to talk about the KPIs.
Welcome back to the Policy Address TV Forum. Chief Executive, in the last session, we started talking about KPIs. Now, you have proposed over 100 indicators on different areas. And you say some of the indicators are about quantity, some about quality, and some about time frame. And there are many policy areas covered. And in the policy address, you mentioned, and you've also said many times on public occasions, that we're transitioning from stability to prosperity. So do you have a KPI for that? Let's say for our economy, would you look at it on the transaction volume, measure it by the transaction volume in the stock market of the Hang Seng Index or what? So what measurements are there for transitioning from stability to prosperity? Now, our KPIs to change the culture, but then we shouldn't just focus on indicators. If we're just trying to achieve indicators, that could be counterproductive. Why? In terms of management, let's say there is a company that needs to lend out more money, but then there's another indicator not to have bad debt. So the two indicators are contradictory in a sense. So if we just try to achieve our indicators, it may not help us achieve our overall objective. So we mustn't just focus on indicators, and because if we do that, it's just as bad as having no indicators at all. So our objective is really to change the culture so we could work in a way that we could achieve our indicators. And then we should keep an open mind when we look at indicators. We are at a critical stage of transitioning from stability to prosperity. I think there are two things that we must need to do properly. One, we need to build a solid foundation. So we need to build a very secure foundation. We need a strong foundation in terms of security so we could move ahead without having to worry about our security. So first we need strong foundation. We need to be alert to threats. So we need to enhance our security awareness. So we can't just see all threats are the same. For example, when we had the third and fourth wave of the epidemic, and we came to know that Omicron was coming at us hard and faster. We knew we didn't have enough manpower resources and other resources, so we need to be alert to that. And so that's why we need to enhance our awareness. And more importantly, as I mentioned in the policy address, it's of overriding importance that we have development. Because if we want to transition from stability to prosperity, that means we want to prosper. That means we need to enhance our competitiveness. We need to enlarge our talent pool. We need to have more land resources. And we need to stand united. Then we have the strength. Because if we are not united, then we are not as strong. So we need to build the foundation for development on many fronts, and then we could achieve our transition from stability to prosperity. And also, we need to build a set of values that suit Hong Kong. Now, in the speech of President Xi on the 1st of July, he made it clear we need to promote the love for Hong Kong and the country. And we need to set up a set of mainstream core values. Because then everyone could work in the same direction. It, of course, is better for all of us to be working in different directions and to be canceling out each other's effort. So in the policy address, I've proposed that we need to build a strong foundation. So that means we like building up our physique so we won't get sick. And then I will be strong enough to, go on the stage for, say, a boxing fight or whatever. And then we could win, we would succeed, and then we could share the fruits of our success. So we need to stay united for us to have a better chance of success. Next, David Wong. Now, you have proposed a red team concept, so someone will play the role of being critical on opposing your view. So how are you going to choose these people? How many will there be in the team, and what are the criteria for selecting the team members? Now, I was in certain training courses, especially courses with a military background, and then I learned about this red team concept. Now, from my training experience, it was the case of a general attacking another place. So he would formulate an attack plan, and the other general would criticize the plan to say that you are not allowing for enough reprovisioning, and then this is your weak link and whatever. So that's how they improve the plan. Now, in my career and when I was in previous positions, I always try to think about it that way, because there are always blind spots. So we need to complement each other's strengths. And so someone has to point out my blind spots, and I'll point out someone else's blind spot, and then we'll be able to formulate a better plan. And so who will be in the red team? Now, if there's someone with experience, of course, that would be great. But whether these are people who have experience or not, we could still achieve the same objective. Now, so we need to keep improving policy to make sure we don't have blind spots, and more importantly, it's about changing the culture again. You know, the red team concept, as you heard me, is about keep improving the plan. It's also about having a sense of danger. That is the bottom line thinking. That's important, because if we are able to change the culture this way, then when everyone wants to formulate policy, the person will know that he may have blank spots, so he would listen to other people's views. And if there are others who criticize his proposal, then it will make it better, actually. So and he wouldn't mind. So. Now, for those on your election teams, will they have a chance to join the red team? Red team is about, spending time and effort. So it should be someone from within the organization. And someone could actually play that role at once. It's not that difficult. For example, in my previous positions, I would invite someone who were not involved, and I would ask them what they think about the idea, and they say, "Oh, well, that's it's not right." And so, haven't you thought about this? And then immediately, there'll be more ideas open to me, and then I'll be able to identify my blind spots. And of course, if these are people with experience, they're experts, of course they will come up with even more constructive views. But I think what's important is we have this culture, and then every day we'll be making progress. And so even within your own department, if we are able to do that, then that means we could, do better. Of course, we could always do better still. Punyan Singh of Cable TV. Now let's talk about talents, which is another focus of your policy address. You're setting up office, teams, and service units and so on. So it seems that you've focused more on imported labor rather than the local workforce. In 2 years, we have lost 140,000 people in our workforce. Some may have emigrated. So how are you going to retain our talents, and what do you have to say to young people who plan to leave Hong Kong? Well, there are several points. One, we are a family, so people will have opportunities in Hong Kong. They could also contribute to Hong Kong, which is their family. So that's why in the policy address I have proposed various measures on education. And then with vocational training and professional training, there are various measures too. For example, we are giving more subsidy to vocational training, and then for some half-day courses, we're also offering subsidy and so on. The whole purpose is for Hong Kong people to see that there are opportunities here, so we want to equip them. And apart from conventional education, there could be vocational training, so people could, realize their dreams. So that's one way for people to stay here. Of course, there are others with other ideals. They want to leave Hong Kong. This happens often throughout the history of Hong Kong. We have to appreciate that this is something that happens in Hong Kong all the time. But then if more people think Hong Kong is a nice place, then we could attract talents here. And if Hong Kong is doing well, then we will also bring back people who've left Hong Kong. Because when they go overseas, they were able to see that there are many good institutions in Hong Kong. Because I lived overseas for a year, and I came to realize that we had great transport infrastructure. Public transport, is always punctual. Because when I was overseas, I was reading a book, and then I realized I waited an hour and there's still no public transport. So, and then our taxation system, we are very competitive on many fronts. So it's about enhancing our own competitiveness, as I said this afternoon. Hong Kong, there are many appealing aspects for Hong Kong. Before 2019, we didn't have the epidemic, we didn't have any unrest, we didn't have national security incidents. At the time, we were very attractive, we were very appealing to others. At that time, we had a very conservative talent importation scheme, and still many people came here. Why? That means we have good DNA. But then we can't say that because our DNA is strong, so we'll be complacent. No. That's why we are doing a lot to attract people to come to Hong Kong. Now, for Hong Kong, on our current basis, we have, policies on industrialization, on land, on talents, and so on. And then Hong Kong will move from stability to prosperity. Also, there are opportunities presented by the country. So there are good prospects, and people will look at that and see which is the best place for them to develop the career. And then they will see, okay, I've left Hong Kong, maybe because I went abroad to study or whatever, but this is a place where I could develop a career. And then they will come back. So for all kinds of talents, for local talents, we try to retain them. And for those who've left Hong Kong, we want to do well here, and then they will come back. And then for overseas talents, if they see Hong Kong as a good place for career development, well, and which is a fact, and they may come. We have the 14th five-year plan, the GBA development, and so on. These are presenting us with a host of opportunities. So Hong Kong has this distinct and unique advantage that no one could replace. So we need to be objective and looking at all the advantages we have. We need to be confident. In the important speech on the 1st of July, we have a good DNA. So at the next session, we'll talk about bringing in enterprises as talents. Thank you.
Welcome back to the program. In this session, Poon Yu-sing from Cable TV will continue to follow up on questions about the scramble for talent. Chief Executive, you mentioned that before 2019, we managed to bring in talent. So it may have to do with the brain drain. Well, what we have now, the pro-establishment camp said that they hope the government could roll out measures for reconciliation. For 70% of those students who haven't been prosecuted, can you set a deadline? Can you set a cutoff time to relaunch things? Do you have a timetable in mind for reconciliation? Now, first of all, I want to talk about the concept of the rule of law. Everyone has to take responsibility for their own actions. Without the rule of law as a basis, society will be plunged into chaos. It is necessary to rebuild this awareness of the rule of law. Someone may have broken the law and then has served their sentence or borne their legal responsibility. Then we should help these people. That's a clear principle in rule of law. Now, if there are ways to help those who have borne their legal responsibility, and I support giving these people help to reform themselves, the government attaches importance to rehabilitation efforts, whatever their offenses may be. That's why there are all kinds of measures surrounding reconciliation. The CSD and other discipline services are offering help. So as a matter of principle, we have to uphold the principle of the rule of law. Otherwise, we will be sending a wrong signal to the community. That's my first point. Second, we should focus on working towards our goal, transitioning from chaos to stability and then moving from stability to prosperity. The interest of the community as a whole comes first, as development is of overriding importance. The basic law has set out our overall direction. After the electoral system is improved, now everything regarding elections are enshrined in the legal framework. As we're transitioning from stability to prosperity, you see higher efficiency in the electoral, and people stick to the issues under discussion, and under the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong. Now, how do we make the most of this principle? And we're still exploring the way to achieve that. We now have patriots administering Hong Kong. It's a return to rational discussions and high efficient discussions of our policies. But we need to get the legislative branch and executive branch to work together to achieve synergy. But how do we further improve the efficiency? These are things we're still exploring, but I will work on this. Now, I have started doing anti-chamber exchange sessions. After each session, we look into ways to taking things to the next level. For legislative councils and the government, we're exploring ways to do things even more efficiently in administering Hong Kong as a whole. So it's more than just about lawmakers scrutinizing the laws and the government launching measures. The overall principle is how do we take things to the next level? Now over to TVB News, Lau Chun-yok. Chief Executive, there's a global scramble for talent. We have to outcompete our competitors. So how can we beat our competitors? Say you're a company, you want a certain employee, you offer a higher pay. What can you do when it comes to scrambling for talent? Now, can you offer incentives to get people to come over here? Instead of just saying that we have our own advantages and people will come here. Now, I have certainly indicated that we shouldn't be complacent. We have to showcase our advantages, what we have to offer. In the policy I have announced, some of the things you mentioned are already incorporated in my policy address. We will be trying to bring in strategic businesses. There will be tailor-made plans to bring in such businesses. And there may be co-investment initiatives, concessionary measures, other support measures, say measures in terms of tax or land. The measures to make it easier for them to arrange their family members' schooling, for example, tailor-made arrangements. As someone considering coming here, maybe wondering, are there development opportunities for me in Hong Kong? It's more than just about the salary. There are also development opportunities, which is something Hong Kong has to offer, plenty of them here. And what about life in Hong Kong? In innovation and technology, we have the InnoCell. There are also new policy measures allowing businesses to offer accommodation to their employees. The point here being to bring in more businesses and talent. The people of Hong Kong will benefit in the end. There's a critical mass when you talk about productivity. Once you hit that critical mass, you have a multiplier effect. And then you can have much higher productivity after you hit the critical mass. Now, that's what I mean by the concept of critical mass. So we're offering not just the institutions. There are also support measures, other concessionary or measures or incentives. There is also out-of-the-box thinking. We're doing things more proactively. We're approaching people, showcasing the opportunities. People wouldn't be aware if we do not approach them with the opportunities we have. You have an industry chain from the starting point all the way to the very end. The chain may start in Hong Kong and end in somewhere in the Greater Bay Area. So that's where there are other development opportunities, boundless opportunities. Now over to RTHK, Wong Ming-Hei, Chief Executive. As we're approaching the conclusion of the show, now you're a fan of concerts. I used to attend concerts a lot, but now I'm busy, so I just watch similar programs on TV. Recently, there's a Canadian singer, Avril Lavigne, canceled her concert in Hong Kong. Some argue that Amber Code holders will not be able to host concerts in Hong Kong. Now, there is a Blackpink, a South Korean pop group, was trying to go on a world tour, but they have been unable to set a date for their concert in Hong Kong. Some argue this has to do with our COVID restrictions. That instead of inviting people from in business and politics, wouldn't it be more effective in terms of telling good Hong Kong stories if we invite pop stars like Rolling Stone to Hong Kong? Do you think the COVID restrictions are hampering the effect of your efforts at telling good Hong Kong stories? We have different measures in place due to COVID restrictions. When you compare us with other places, I'm sure you all appreciate why there are such differences. And we are trying to achieve a very important goal. Now, COVID is still with us. We're used to having these infection numbers, but these infection numbers are still on the high side. And as I've said, we have to watch where COVID is going. We have to make sure our healthcare system can cope with the infections. I attach importance to our competitiveness. But in terms of maintaining a balance here, I have to make a decision on this. I will try to allow the maximum number of activities in the city. For major events, there are targeted measures to make sure they can be organized in Hong Kong. Now, certain people may consider different factors and arrive at their decisions. I get that. But we cannot just focus on one thing while disregarding other things regarding our COVID policies, especially when those policies have an impact on the vulnerable, exposing these people to higher risks. In fighting COVID, I want to avoid having to backtrack on our measures. And I believe that's the last thing you want to see. Nobody wants to see flip-flopping in measures. The last thing I want to see is to see all of our efforts go down the drains. Now, there are people arguing in counterfactual terms. But in all the hypothetical situations, nobody can guarantee that certain things will not happen. Dr. Liang Wanlian, an expert of our country, once said that given the current level of science, we cannot tell when certain things will happen at a particular time. My job is to make sure that we have a clear goal and we work towards that goal. If there are things we do and that could derail our efforts, that may undermine our efforts as a whole. Now, how do we boost our competitiveness? And why are we relaxing certain restrictions? Because we have regard to the actual circumstances in the city and the needs of people in the community. Now, that may not be able to keep everyone happy, but we work towards the goal instead of flip-flopping in our measures. Now, there are government advisors saying that we could do 0+0, and you are rejecting those suggestions. But the experts are divided in their opinions. Some have remained silent. They have medical expertise, and they have suggested caution. Now, there are different opinions in the medical world. Medical experts stick to matters in the world. Now, if it's a question of business, then we listen to someone in the business world. In Hong Kong, I'm open to different kinds of views. Thank you, Mr. John Lee, for attending our TV forum. There's a lot of content in the policy address, and let's hope that it can all be implemented. Thank you for watching our show.